And hello, children of the corn, and children of the peas, and children of the carrots, children of the succotash, I guess. That may be an obscure and weird reference for some of you in the European sector or outside the American remit. I have no idea. I don't know if anybody even knows what succotash is anymore, and I'm not particularly mourning its loss as a cultural touchstone. But for those of you who care, it was a mixed vegetables thing with carrots and peas and corn. Anyway, doesn't matter. Hello. Good to see you all. I'm very sorry about last week. We had a catastrophic loss of power. Apparently, somebody drove their car into a large power pole and knocked it over, and we lost power for close to 24 hours. Long stretch anyway. And of course, at our house, because we live in the hills and, we're in one of those kind of setups, those quasi-rural, even though we're 5 minutes from town. When we lost our power, we also lost our well. So we had no water as well as no electricity. So, hey, it was fun. But I'm not complaining. Many people have it much worse than we had it last weekend. But I did feel bad because, of course, I couldn't do my reading. And since I'd missed one back when I had my first vaccination, then I was feeling that was too often to miss in a short stretch of time. Anyway, speaking of vaccinations, I am not only vaccinated, but now I and everybody in the house is past our safety period. So we can now go out into the public again. Although obviously we're still trying to follow the safety procedures because as far as I know, the last I heard, you can still infect other people without being infected, well, or at least as a carrier. So we're still being cautious and doing all that stuff. But, we actually went out and saw some friends the other night, which was kind of stunning. I kept not knowing what to do. It was odd. It will clearly take a while to recover as a human population from all of this pandemic weirdness. But anyway, so that's the good news on our end. Everybody is through their safety period, and so we are all fully vaccinated. Hooray! And I'm very pleased about that. Let me check in very quickly with those of you who have already checked in. Wouter, yes. Holger, yes, good to see you both. Hello, Ron, good to see you too. Manuscript will be on the way within the next probably 2 to 3 weeks, so just to warn you. And I will tell you more about that, obviously, in a different situation. Hello, Ronnie. Jeremy, hello, same to you. And that's both the good morning and the manuscript on the way part. So Iris, hello, Iris, good to see you. And who else have we got here? Carol, hello, Carol, good to see you. James, hello, James, good morning to you, sir. Felicity, good evening out there in New Zealand. Lovely to see you, Felicity, always a pleasure. Someday I'm going to get back. I'm going to get back to Wellington. I hope you're still there because it's such a nice place. I'll bring Deb this time and you'll get to meet her and we'll come and hang out. Leah, hello. Good to see you. Happy middle of the night to you too. Mahmoud, good to see you. Good morning. And Marco, good morning. Manda, good evening. Cindy, good morning from Ottawa. Well, good morning back to Ottawa. Lovely to see you. And I actually have a fan in Ottawa, and it's Pierre Trudeau. Not Pierre Trudeau. Justin Trudeau. Thank you. Unless I'm complaining, I'm mixing that up with no, that's Gary Trudeau is the Doonesbury guy. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, or the Premier of Canada? Prime Minister, I don't know. God, I'm so confused and life is so complicated. Anyway, the guy who runs Canada likes my books, which is, I still have to find some way to manipulate that for my own evil cause somehow. I don't know, get some kind of Canadian diplomatic immunity off him or something. Anyway, no, I was very pleased when I found that out. Andre, hello, good morning and super cool to see you too. Cliff, hi Cliff. Chris, hello. Too many other things to do. Yeah, you can watch it later. That's okay. That's why we record it. Ronnie, good to see you. Jessica, hi Jessica. Ilva, hello, my dear. I'm glad to be back too. Chris in Lubeck, lovely to see you. Mark, hi, Mark. Yeah, the 29th will always be a weird day for me too. Anyway, so good to see you though. Christine, a pleasure. And who else have we got here? Have I got everybody who's jumped on at this point? I think so. Ron says Gary Trudeau would have made a great prime minister. He probably would. He's still around. It's never too late. You know, he could, I don't know, maybe Canada has the same laws that we do about you have to be born there. But, you know, I mean, I think he was born, Trudeau was born in like New York or New England somewhere, which is practically Canada. So, you know, same diff. Anyway, what else? Finishing up the first half of the Navigator's Children, which may now get another name, and save the Navigator's Children for Volume 4. Unlike what we did with the American version of Two Green Angel Tower, which was Part 1 and Part 2, but my publishers seem to want another name for it. So I don't have any information on that yet. I'm still trying to figure it out. In Britain, or in the UK marketplace, Commonwealth market, whatever you want to call it, Two Green Angel Tower was called Siege, and Part 2 was called Storm. So we're going to do something like that this time, I guess, or just give it a separate title. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, so that's what's going on with that. I'm finishing up the book. I'm going to be sending it off fairly soon to several of the people here actually tonight, because they're the folks who help me not to make too many stupid mistakes. And any stupid mistakes that do sneak through are my own fault. So I'll take them off the hook before it even happens. So what else? Anything else? Yeah, we're just doing stuff. We're doing stuff. We're now able to go out a little more. On the other hand, we're still, you know, I'm in work mode, so I'm not suddenly packing up to, you know, go to some fancy vacation destination. Yeah, so that's where we are, and I guess it's time to read. I don't have any other specific things to talk about. Just the usual, you know, we're just being our usual selves. We're the dogs are both freaking out today. I don't know what that's about. Johnny, our big dog, got growly about protecting his supper dish, which is not like him. So he's either gone mental or it's just something temporary. He also, Walter, our Chihuahua, little tiny guy, but extremely alpha, and bosses Johnny around. I think I've told you in the past how when Johnny used to get out of line, Walter would leap up and grab Johnny's jowl with his teeth and hang off of it to let him know that he was not pleased with Johnny's behavior. So Walter periodically has these kind of little mini seizure things where he doesn't have a full seizure, where he you know, falls over and you know, has the whole thing. Which I have had in several of my dogs before, but Walter just gets really weird and freaky when that happens, and he runs around the house and he barks, and he doesn't, if you touch him the wrong way, he yelps, but it's not an injury. And, you know, we figured out over the years that it's a kind of a minor seizure thing that happens to him. But anyway, so that might have been what set Johnny off, because Walter was definitely doing that today and freaking out. I had to put him on my lap for like an hour and just kind of calm him while I was trying to work. And if you've ever tried to write a complicated or edit a complicated novel while a tiny rat-like dog was on your lap going every few moments, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Anyway, all right, so we're going to go back to the book. I'm not going to try and update you guys where I was, because if you've forgotten, there's too much plot water under the over the bridge now, or over the dam, under the bridge, whatever it is. There's too much of it now for me to bring it back up. But anyway, they're having the Bryony, because Barrack has been unwell. Bryony has been leading the first meeting of the council since their brother died, and because of that, she's a little touchy and testy, because of course the last thing going on in the last council meeting was that they were talking about whether or not they should send her off to her to the bandit who has kidnapped their father. So anyway, I'm going to go back a little ways just to get you guys back onto track with what's happening. Baba. Skimmers, this is Ferris Vanson thinking. Hundreds of the water-loving folk lived within the castle walls, and even though they generally stuck to their own kind and places, Vanson had encountered them often. But seeing them in the highest council chamber did surprise him, especially because he had thought that his own news would be asked for next. Highnesses, Avenbrone declared, this is the fisherman Turley Longfingers and his daughter. They have something they wish to tell you. Beric stirred. What is this? The entertainment? Have we put the old puzzle out to graze at last and found some new talents? Bryony gave her brother a look of irritation. The prince is tired, but he's right about one thing. This is unusual, Lord Brone. It feels like a bit of mummery saved till last. Not last, I'm afraid, responded the Lord Constable. There will be more. But forgive the surprise. I did not know whether they would come forth and tell this story until just before the council came to the table. I've been chasing down the rumor for days. Very well. Bryony turned to the fisherman, who was squeezing an already shapeless hood or hat in the claw-like hands that must have given him his name. He said your name is Turley? The man swallowed. Vanson wondered what could make one of the normally imperturbable skimmers, folk who routinely swam with sharks and killed them with knives when it was needful, look so harrowed. Turley, yes, he said in a thick voice. It is that, my queen. I'm not a queen, and my brother isn't a king. The real king is our father, and he still lives, thank the gods. She looked at him closely. I have heard that among yourselves you skimmers don't use canoric names. Turley's eyes widened. They had very little white around the edges. We do have our own talk, Majesty, that's true. Well, if you would prefer to use a name like that, you may. He looked for a moment as though he might actually bolt the room, but at last shook his gleaming head. Prefer not, Majesty. Close held our names and talk, but no harm done to tell you of our clan. Back on Sunset Tide, we are called. She smiled a little, but her brother beside her just looked aggrieved. A very fine name. Now, why has Lord Brone brought you before the council? My daughter Ina's tale 'tis truly, but she was frightened to speak before them as high as yourselves, so came I with her. The man stretched out his long arm, and his daughter moved against him. In her odd way, with her small stature and huge, watchful eyes, Vanson thought the girl almost pretty, but he could not ignore that oddity entirely. The skimmers carried their strangeness around with them, like a cloak. He had never yet talked to one without being reminded several times by his eyes and ears and even his nose that it was a skimmer he was speaking to and not an ordinary person. Very well, then, said Bryony. We are listening. On the night, what happened? It was on the night before the night of the killing, said Turley. Bryony sat a little straighter. It was so quiet in the room, Vanson could hear her skirts rustling. The killing? Of the prince? The one that just was buried? Beric was not slouching any more either. Go on. My daughter here, she was... The hairless man looked flustered again, as though he had been pulled out of a shadowy, safe place and into bright light. Out when she should not be, with a young man, one of the Hull Scrapes, the Sand folk, who should know better. And where is this young man? Asked Bryony. Nursing some bruises. Turley Longfingers spoke with a certain dark satisfaction. He'll not be taking young girls midnight paddling in our lagoon for a bit. Go on, then. Or perhaps now that your daughter has seen us and heard us, she will be able to tell the story herself. Ina? The girl jumped at the sound of her name, although she had been listening to every word. She blushed, and Vanson thought the dark mottling on neck and cheeks robbed her. Excuse me. She blushed, and Vanson thought the dark mottling on neck and cheeks robbed her of the momentary beauty she had showed before. Yes, Majesty, the girl said. A boat I saw, Majesty. A boat. With no lights. It said slid past the place where I was swimming with my friend, it did. All cut paddled. Cut paddled? Dipping paddle blade sideways like, Turley demonstrated. That's what we call that stroke when someone tries to be quiet. This was in the South Lagoon, Barrick asked. Where? Near the shore at Hangskin Row, the girl replied. Someone was waiting for it on the old tannery dock. That's how we name it. The one closest to the tower what has all the banners on it. They had a light, him on the dock, I mean, but it was hooded. Up the boat went to it, still cut paddled, and then they gave him something. They? Bryony leaned forward. The princess looked unusually calm, but Ferris Vanson thought he could see something else behind her pale features, a fear she was struggling to hide, and for a moment all the helpless affection he had for her came surging up inside him. He would do anything for Bryony Eden, he realized. Anything to protect her, no matter what she thought of him. Not just Vanson. He needed no enemies to do it. He could mock himself. Do anything? You already had the protecting of her elder brother, and now he's dead. The one in the boat, the skimmer girl said, gave something to the one on the dock. We couldn't see what it was or who they were. Then the boat went away again, out toward the front seawall. And even after the prince was murdered the next night, you did not come forward? Bryony asked, her face gone hard. Even after the ruling lord of Southmarch was killed? Are you so used to seeing things like this on the lagoon? Dark boats paddling silent? Yes, sometimes, the girl told her, gaining courage as she went. Our folk and the fishermen have feuds, and people get into trouble, and other things happen. But I still thought it meant no good, that shuttered light. I feared saying anything, though, because of my Rafe. Your Rafe, snorted her father. He'll be no one's Rafe if I see him near our dock house again. Hands soft as skate skin, and he's a hole scraper. He's kind, said the girl quietly. I think that's enough. Avon Brown came forward. Unless your highnesses have other questions. They can go, Bryony said. Both she and Barrett looked troubled. Meanwhile, Ferris Vanson was working it through in his head and realizing that the tower the girl mentioned must be the Tower of Spring, and that the prince and princess must know that too. Queen Anissa's residence, he thought. But there are other things on that side of the castle as well. The observatory, more than a few taverns, and at least one of our own guardhouses, not to mention the homes of hundreds of skimmers and other ordinary folk. Tells us nothing truly useful. Still, there was something about the idea that tugged at him, so that for a moment he nearly forgot his own pressing errand there. As Lord Brone's man-at-arms showed out the two skimmer folk, the court physician Chavin slipped in past them to stand just inside the council chamber, an unsettled look on his round face. Now we have one last piece of business, said Brone. A minor thing only, so I think that after such a long piece of talking and listening, we might send the extra guards and servants away and let them get on with preparing for the midday meal. Will you indulge me in this, Princess Bryony? The twins gave their assent, and within a few moments the chamber was empty of everyone except the councillors themselves, Vanson and his guards, and Chavin, who still lingered beside the far door like a schoolboy waiting for punishment. So, Beric sounded tired and childishly irritated. It was hard to believe that he and Bryony were the same age. Obviously you want to thwart rumors, Lord Brone. So why wait until after the news of this mystery boat has been delivered? Right now, half the people you sent out are hurrying to find someone to tell about this. Because that is what we want people talking about, Highness, said Brone. It is true about the boat, but at this point it's also meaningless. It will not frighten people, just intrigue them. Best of all, it will mean that no one will be in a hurry to find out what we're saying here now. They already know what we're going to be saying, though, don't they? Asked Bryony. We are going to discuss what that skimmer girl saw and whether it means anything. Perhaps, said Brone, but perhaps not. Forgive me for playing a deep game, my lord and lady, but I have another bit of news for you, one that would make for much more fearful rumors. Captain Vanson. The moment came upon him so suddenly, and with his head still so full of questions about the skimmers and of thoughts about the princess herself, that for a painfully extended moment Ferris Vanson just stood, not quite hearing. Then he suddenly realized the Lord Constable was staring at him, waiting, as was everyone else in the council. He leaped toward the door, certain he could hear the prince and princess snickering behind him, and stepped out into the passage to call for the other guards to bring in the young man. So, you stand before us again, Vanson, Bryony said when he had returned to the chamber. I hope you are not looking for an advancement of your position. He waited a few moments to make sure he had control of his voice, would not misspeak. If she hated him, he could not but believe he had earned it. Your Highnesses, lords, this man beside me is named Raymond Beck. He has only reached Southmarch this morning. He has a tale you should hear. When it was finished, and the first rush of amazed questions had gusted itself out, silence fell over the chill, windowless room. By the way, I'll just jump in here since we've had a couple of weeks at least, well, probably more like a month. Raymond Beck appeared only briefly earlier in the story. He was the one who was coming back with a caravan when suddenly they were attacked by strange things. And when he recovered afterwards, he found that basically everybody else in his party of merchants had vanished. What does it mean? The princess asked at last. Monsters? Elves? Ghosts? It seems an unbelievable tale. She stared at Raymond Beck, who was shivering as though he had just come in out of a snowstorm, instead of a day bright with autumn sunshine. What are we to do with such news? It is foolishness, growled Tyne of Blueshore. Several of the other council members nodded vigorous agreement. Bandits, yes, the roads to the west are not safe, even in these days. But this man has been struck on the head and dreamed the rest. That, or he seeks to make a name for himself. No! Cried Beck. Tears welled in his eyes. He hid his head in his hands, muffling his voice. It happened! It is all true! And bandits are boggarts? Why did you alone survive? Demanded one of the barons. Chavin stepped forward. Your pardon, my lords, but I suspect that this man was merely the one chosen to bear the message. What message? Small spots blazed on Prince Beric's cheeks as though his fever had returned. He seemed almost as frightened as Raymond Beck. That the world has gone mad? I do not know what the message is, said Chavin, but I think I know who is sending it. I have been told by one I know, one I trust, that the shadow line has begun moving. Moving! Avon Brone, who had already heard the young merchant's story, now for the first time looked truly startled. How so? Chavin explained how a Funderling man, searching for rare stones in the hills, had found the line moved some yards closer to the castle, the first such movement in anyone's memory. I had planned to tell you of this, your highnesses, but the tragic events that you know of kept me busy, and then I did not wish to burden you when you still had your brother to bury. That was days and days ago, Bryony said angrily. Why have you kept silent since then? Galen Tully saved the physician from having to answer immediately. What is all this about? The Duke of Summerfield demanded loudly. Scholar, you and this Helmingsea lackwit spout nurses' tales as though you spoke of true places like Thale or Hyrosol. The shadow line? There is nothing beyond it but mist and wet lands too cold to farm and old stories. You are young, my lord, said Chavin gently, but your father knew, and his father, and your grandfather several times over, was one of the men who regained Southmarch and this castle from the hands of the Twilight people. The small man shrugged, but there was something terrible in the gesture, an entire language of resignation that did not hide the fear. It could be that after all these years, the quiet folk seek to have it back. The counselors all seemed to begin shouting at once, no one listening to any other. Bryony stood up and extended a trembling hand. Silence! Chavin, you will attend my brother and me at once in the chapel, or somewhere else we can have privacy. You will tell us everything you know, but that is not enough. Dozens of our countrymen have been robbed and perhaps murdered on the Setland Road. We must find out everything we can, immediately, before all trace of the attackers is gone. She looked at her twin, who nodded, but his face showed his unhappiness. We must go to the place where this occurred with force. We must find the track of these creatures and follow it. If they can take men away from the road, they will have left some mark of their passage. She turned on Raymond Beck, who had sunk to a crouch as though his legs could no longer support him. Do you swear you have told us the truth, man? Because if we find that you have made up this story, you will spend the rest of a short and unhappy life in chains. The merchant could only shake his head. It is all true. Then we will send a troop of soldiers at once, she said, to follow the trail wherever it leads. That at least we can do while we consider what this may mean, what message we have been sent. Across the shadow line? Avon Brone appeared surprised by the idea. You would send men across the shadow line? Not you, she said scornfully. Have no fear. The Lord Constable stood. There is no need to insult me, Princess. They were the only two standing. Their eyes met over the heads of the others. Again, you have showed me hasty, Lord Brone, Bryony said after a moment's silence, each word crisp as the sound of a small bell being struck. Despite the trickery you have used today to put on this little show, you do not deserve as much anger as I have shown. I apologize. He made a stiff little bow. Accepted? Of course, Highness. With thanks, although you do me too much honor. I will go, said Galen suddenly. He rose, too, his face flushed as though with drink. I will lead a troop to the spot. I will find these bandits, and I wager my good name that they will prove to be no more than that. But whatever they are, I will bring them back, or their corpses, to answer for their crime. Vanson saw Bryony exchange a look with her brother that the captain of the royal guard could not interpret. No, said Beric. What? The Duke turned on the prince in anger. Galen Tully seemed to have lost his usual composure. Vanson's muscles tensed as he watched. You cannot go yourself, Beric. You are sick, crippled, and your sister may think she is a man, but the gods know she is not. I demand the honor of leading this troop. But that is just the issue, cousin, said Bryony, speaking with cold care. It is not an honor, and whoever goes must go with an open heart, not with an intent to prove himself right. But she turned her back on him, and her gaze swept down the row of nobles at the table, Tyne and Rorik and many others, before it lit on Ferris Vanson, where he stood behind the crumpled, sobbing form of the merchant Raymond Beck. For a moment her gaze met his, and Vanson thought he saw a little smile flicker across her lips. It was not a kind smile. You, Captain, you have failed to prevent my brother's murder, and you have failed to find a reason that explains why Lord Shazo, one of our family's most loyal retainers, should have performed that murder. Perhaps you will be able to fulfill this new charge more successfully. He couldn't look at her any longer. Staring at his boots, he said, Yes, Highness, I will accept the charge. No! Galen was out of his seat again, so angry that for a worrying moment Ferris thought the Duke actually meant to attack the prince and princess. Vanson was not the only one. The nobles on either side of Galen Tully snatched at his arms, but failed to hold him. Even Brone's hand dropped to the hilt of his sword, but the Lord Constable was almost as far away as the guard captain, and much slower. Gods! Ferris took a stumbling step forward. Too late, still too late. I failed again. But Summerfield only turned and stalked away from the great table toward the far door of the council chamber. When he turned in the doorway, the young Duke's face was composed again, almost frighteningly so. I see. I am not needed here, either in this council or in this castle. With your permission, Prince Beric, Princess Bryony, I will return to my own lands where there may be something of use I can do. Galen Tully had asked their leave, but he did not wait to receive it before departing the chamber. His boot heels banged away down the corridor. Bryony turned to Vanson again, as though Galen had never been in the room. You will take as many men as you and the Lord Constable think fit to assemble, Captain. You will take this man, too, she gestured at Beck, and go to the place his caravan was attacked. From there, send back messengers to tell us what you find, and if you can pursue the robbers, pursue them. Raymond Beck realized what was being said. Don't send me back, Highness! He shrieked, scrabbling across the floor toward the prince and princess. The gods' mercy not there! Put me in irons as you promised, rather than send me to that place. Beric pulled his foot back when the man would have grabbed it. How else will we know that the spot is the correct one? Princess Bryony asked gently. If every trace is gone, as you have said, your fellows may be alive. Would you steal away even the slim chance of rescuing them? She turned to the table full of slack-mouthed counselors, a row of bewildered masks like the chorus of some antique mummer's play. The rest of you may go, but you are sworn to secrecy about this attack. He who speaks a word about it joins Shazo in the stronghold. Chavin, you and Lord Brone come with my brother and myself to the chapel. Rorik and Tyne, come to us in an hour, please. Captain Vanson, you will leave tomorrow at dawn. After she was gone and the chamber was all but empty, Vanson and two of his guardsmen helped the weeping Raymond Beck up from the floor. The princess does not take well to begging, Ferris Vanson told the young merchant as they led him toward the door. The guard captain's own thoughts were slow and numbed as fish at the bottom of a frozen stream. Her older brother was killed. Did you know that? But we will do our best to take care of you. For now, let us find you some wine and a bed. That's the best any of us will get tonight. Or for some time to come, I think. Chapter 14, Whitefire. Storm music. This tale is told on the headlands. The Great One comes up from the deeps. His eye is a shrouded pearl, his voice the ocean wind. From the Bonefall Oracles. Beric's first thought was that the man looked like a chained beast, both frightening and pitiable, like the bear brought to the castle during the last Perrin's Day feast and made to dance in the throne room. All the courtiers had laughed. He had even laughed himself to see its clumsy antics and hear its snort of irritation, so like a man's when its trainer flicked its bandy legs with a whip. Only Bryony had been angry. But she always worries more about animals than people. If I had been one of the dogs, she would have never left my side while I was ill. His father had not laughed either, he suddenly remembered. For on that Perrin's Day, they had all still been together. Olin here in Southmarch, Kendrick alive, everything as it should be. Now all had changed, and since the fever, even his own thoughts had become strange and untrustworthy. Let me read that sentence again. Now all had changed, and since the fever, even his own thoughts had become strange and untrustworthy. He forced himself to concentrate, staring at Shazo with what he hoped was the proper expression of a ruling prince to a traitorous vassal. Despite the ankle chain half hidden by the straw on the floor of the stronghold, its far end socketed into the stone wall, the Tuani man looked less like a bear than a captured lion. You could never make a lion dance on its chain, he thought. There should be guards, said Avonbrone. It is not safe. You are here with us, Bryony replied sweetly. You are a famous fighter, Lord Constable. So is Lord Shazo, with all respect. But he is chained, and you are not, and he is not armed. Shazo stirred. Beric had always found it hard to think of him as anything but ageless, but now the man's years showed in his slack skin and gray-whiskered cheeks. He had been given clean clothes, but they were poor and threadbare, except for the muscles that still rippled in his forearms, and the back that had not yet learned to bend. This old man might have been a street beggar in Hyrosol or one of the other southern cities. I will not hurt you, he growled. I am not fallen so low. Beric fought down a gust of anger. Is that what you told our brother before you killed him? The prisoner stared. His dark face seemed lightened, as though a layer of fine dust had sifted down onto him from the surrounding stones, or as if his time in the sunless depths had leached out some of his color. I did not kill your brother, Prince Beric. Then what happened? Bryony took a step forward, stopping before Brone was compelled to grab at her arm. I would like to believe you. What happened? I have told Brone already. When I left Kendrick, he was alive. But your dagger was bloodied, Shazo. We found it in your room. The old Tuani warrior shrugged. It was not the prince's blood. Whose was it? Bryony took another step closer, which made even Beric uncomfortable. She was within the compass of the old man's chain now, and all three of his visitors knew his cat quickness. Just tell me that. Shazo looked at her for a moment, then his mouth curved in what might be called a smile, except that there was no jot of mirth in it, nothing of happiness at all. My own. The blood is my own. Barrick's rage flared up again. He's telling a shadow tale, Bryony. I know you want to believe him, but don't let yourself be fooled. He was with Kendrick. Our brother and 2 other men were killed, and the wounds were curved like his dagger, which we found covered in blood. He cannot even tell a good lie. Bryony was silent for a moment. Barrick's right, she said at last. You ask us to believe much that seems unbelievable. I ask nothing. It does not matter to me. But even Shazo's own hands betrayed him, Barrick thought. They sat in his lap like harmless things, but the dark fingers were working, clenching and unclenching. It does not matter to you that my brother is dead? Now Bryony could not keep her own voice calm. That Kendrick has been murdered? He was good to you, Shazo. We have all been good to you. Oh, yes, you have been good to me, you Edens. He moved a little, and the chain clinked. Avon stepped up beside Bryony. Your father defeated me on the battlefield and spared my life. He is a good man. And then he brought me home, like a dog he had found in the road, and made me into his servant. A very good man. You are worse than a dog, you ungrateful creature, shouted Barrick. This was a different Shazo, sullen and self-pitying, but still his tormentor, still the one who so many times had made him feel less than whole. You have never been treated like a servant. He made you a lord. He gave you land, a house, a position of honor. And in that way, he was cruelest of all. The frighteningly empty smile returned, a pale gash in the dark face. As my old life slid away from me like a boat drifting from the bank, he gave me a new life, rich in wealth and honor. I could not even hate him. And later on, it is true, I myself played the slave master. I sold my own freedom. But just because of the 2 of us, I was the worst traitor. That does not mean I have forgiven him. He admits he is a traitor. Barrick moved forward to tug at Bryony's arm, but she resisted him. Come! He admits he hates our family. We have heard enough. He didn't want to be in the shadowy stronghold any longer, separated from the sun and air by yards of stone, caught in this place that stank of misery. He suddenly feared that Shazo held secrets more terrible than any blade, more devastating even than murder. He wanted the old man to stop talking. Bryony waited a moment before she spoke. I don't understand everything you say, but I do know that if you feel any loyalty to our family at all, even a tainted loyalty, then you must tell us the truth. If it is your blood, how did it get there? Shazo slowly lifted his arms. The crisscross slashes had mostly healed. I cut myself. Why? He only shook his head. More likely he was wounded by the guards or Kendrick, Barrick pointed out, while they defended their lives. Was there blood on their weapons? His sister asked. I cannot remember. All this talk of blood had made Bryony go quite pale. The Barrick of half a year ago, he knew, would have said something to distract her, to make it easier to discuss these dreadful things. But now he was hollowed. His insides burned black. Your brother had no weapon, answered Avon Brown, which makes his killing even more cowardly. The guards were covered all over with blood from their own wounds, so it was impossible to tell if their blades had been bloodied before they died. You still have explained nothing, Bryony told the old man. If you want us to believe that, tell us why you cut yourself. What did you and Kendrick speak of that led to such a strange thing? The Master of Arms shook his head. That is between me and him. It will die with me. Those may not be idle words, Lord Shazo, said Avonbrone. As you know, we have not kept the headsman as well employed in King Olin's day as in his father's, but his blade is still sharp. The Master of Arms turned his red-rimmed eyes first on Beric, then Bryony. If you want my head, then take it. I am tired of living. The gods damn your stubbornness, Bryony cried. Would you rather die than tell us what happened? What obscure point of honor have you caught on, Shazo? If there is something that will save your life, then for the sake of all the gods, tell me. I have told you the truth. I did not murder your brother. I would not have harmed him even if he had put his own blade to my throat, because I swore to protect your father and his household. Wouldn't have harmed him. Beric was feeling tired and sick again. Even his anger had become only a distant storm. Strange words. You have knocked me down and beaten me often enough. My bruises haven't healed from the last time. That was not to harm you, Prince Beric. The old man's words had a sharp, cold edge. That was an attempt to make you a man. Now Beric was the one who stepped toward the Master of Arms, hand upraised. Shazo did not move, but even before Avonbrone reached him, Beric had stopped. He had remembered the courtiers who pelted the dancing bear with cherry stones and crusts of bread, and how he had laughed to see the chained creature snapping at the missiles in annoyance. If you are the murderer of our brother, he said, as I think you are, then you will receive your punishment soon enough. Lord Brone is right. Southmarch still has a headsman. Shazo flapped his hand dismissively. His chin sank to his chest, as though he was too weary to keep his head up any longer. That is your last word? Bryony asked. That you did not harm Kendrick? That the blood on your knife was your own? But you won't tell us how it happened. The old man did not look up. That is my last word. As he followed Bryony out the door, Beric wondered if such a mad story could possibly be true. But if it was, then truth itself was not trustworthy, for there was no other explanation for Kendrick's death. No one else suspected but Shazo. Take that away, and all was shadow, as treacherous and inconstant as the worst of his own fevered dreams. He must be the murderer, Beric told himself. If not, reason tottered. Ferris Vanson studied the line of men as though they were suddenly discovered family, as, in a way, they were. They would be living together for weeks or months, traveling into the wild places, and even family did not breed any greater closeness than a company of soldiers, or, in some cases, any greater contempt. They were only half a pentacount altogether. Any greater number would have excited too much attention, and their little troop was dwarfed not only by Wolf's Tooth spire looming just above them, but by the empty expanses of the barracks reviewing yard. Vanson had chosen to take 7 mounted men, including himself, and 12.5 foot soldiers, a pair of them new recruits who were little more than farm boys, to watch after the donkey cart. In order to make things easier for his lieutenant, Jem Tallow, who would command the castle guard in his absence, and needed able, level-headed men, Vanson had deliberately chosen his troops so that more than half were young and inexperienced. There were fewer than 10 of these men that Vanson really trusted in a fight. He hoped it would be enough. Raymond Beck had been given a horse and a sword, both of which he handled like what he was, a merchant's nephew. Vanson had considered armoring the young man as well, but his own experiences in the bandit campaign, of 3 years earlier had taught him that one unused to heavy gear would eventually make things hard for the others, even on horseback. He would keep the youth nearby, with himself and old hand Colum Dyer watching over him. That would be the young man's best armor. "Don't look so grim," he told Beck. "Your caravan was caught unaware, and only the gods know the quality of the fighting men who were with you. Now you're with half a pentacount of hardy Southmarch guard, many of them bloodied in Crace, and against the last of the Grey companies. They won't run from shadows." "Hang on just a moment. What do you want?"
Is the internet guy, is your internet still up?
"As far as I know." "I'm working, honey. I'm literally doing a live broadcast right now."
I know.
It seems to be working. I haven't got any complaints yet, so go ahead.
Okay.
Okay? I can't talk now, honey.
Sure.
Hello, everybody. I'm assuming that I'm still live here. My thing is still on. My son, one of our young people, just came down to tell me that couldn't get the internet working, but I haven't heard anything here, and it seems to be up live, so I'm just going to continue. Anyway, "Don't look so grim," he told Beck. "Your caravan was caught unaware, and only the gods know the quality of the fighting men who were with you. Now you're with half a pentacount of hardy Southmarch guard, many of them blooded in Crace, and against the last of the Grey companies. They won't run from shadows." "Then they are fools." Beck was pale, and his mouth trembled a little when he spoke, but he had gained composure since his audience with the prince and princess. "They have not seen these shadows. They have not seen the devils that live in them." Vanson shrugged. He was not himself entirely happy about their mission. He had spoken largely to cheer the young merchant. Ferris Vanson was a child of Daler's Trough, and had grown up only a short distance from the haunted ruins of Old Westmarch. On days the south wind blew back the mists, the broken shell of its keep could sometimes be seen from the highest hilltops. He and his people knew better than to speak contemptuously, as the Duke of Summerfield had, about the shadow line and what lay beyond that cloudy border. But, like the rest of his people, a fierce and generally standoffish community of hillside farmers and herders, he was also keenly aware that his family's land was a holding that had been only a few generations in the hands of mortals. The Dale folk had long had a sense that there were forces waiting beyond the shadow line to take back those lands, as well as an equally fierce and stubborn determination on their own part not to let that happen. A messenger from Lord Brone trotted into the reviewing yard. Vanson called the troop to order. The horses stamped restlessly, waiting, and the donkey cropped dry grass from between the cobbles. The morning was already far advanced, but there was nothing to do but wait. Already the long shadow cast by Wolf's Tooth Spire was beginning to shrink back into itself. She came at last, a slender shape in mourning black, accompanied by 2 female attendants and the great bulk of the Lord Constable, who, if he was not becoming the king, did seem to be changing into something like the father of the prince and princess, assuming a kind of ceremonial precedence over all the business of the Eden family, despite the comparative lowliness of his title. Brone was rich, though, with vast holdings of lands, and able enough that he had risen higher in the royal family's favor than any of their closer kinsmen. Vanson wondered if it could be this, rather than anything else, that had sent young Galen of Summerfield home to his family's dukedom. The knowledge that Lord Brone had sealed off the avenues of approach to the royal twins, leaving Galen with a superior claim by right of blood, but inferior access. Ferris Vanson couldn't keep his mind for long on such bloodless matters as the princess approached. The past weeks had not been kind to her. She had not painted her face since the funeral, and he could see by the blue shadows beneath her eyes that she had not slept well. Still, despite the cold look she turned upon him, he could not imagine another face that would make him feel as he so helplessly did. Perhaps it really is as the ancients say, he thought. Perhaps the heart was indeed like a piece of dry birchwood, and could only take fire and burn brightly once, that any fire that came after would be only an ember, smaller and cooler. Just my treacherous luck. I should burn for her, for one I can never have, honorably or dishonorably, and who hates me in any case. Captain Vanson, she said in a dry, firm voice, my brother is resting, but he sends his wish that the gods speed your mission. Vanson was a little surprised to see that there was an expression other than contempt on her face, the first time since Kendrick Eden's death that anything else had lit her features when looking at him. The problem was that he could not read the look, which might only have been weariness and disinterest. I see you have your men ready. Yes, Highness. Your pardon, but are you certain you wished us to ride out so plainly in the middle of the day? Everyone will whisper of it. Everyone is already whispering, Captain. How many people did that man there, Beck, speak to before he was brought to the castle? Do you think there is anyone in Wharfside or the Three Gods who hasn't heard his story by now? You and your men will ride out down Market Road, across the causeway, and straight through Southmarch town. Everybody will know that the Edens are not so crippled by grief and fear that they ignore plundered caravans and kidnapped noblewomen. She looked to Brone, who nodded his approval. And this is not only for show, Vanson. We are not taking it lightly, my brother and I. So I trust you will take advantage of any trustworthy travelers on the road to send word back to us of your progress. Yes, Your Highness. The monks of the university have a post service that travels back and forth on the Setland Road every fortnight, and it is a long time yet before the winter will stop them. I will keep you and Lord Brone informed, but I honestly hope I will not be gone so long. You will return only when you have answers to give us, she declared. Sudden fury was like a whip crack in her voice. Of course, Your Highness. He was stung, but in that moment he saw not just her anger, but something deeper and stranger in her expression, as though a frightened prisoner looked out from behind her face. She is afraid. It filled him with ridiculous thoughts, with the wild urge to kiss her hand, to declare his painful love for her, thwarted in its natural direction and forced to find other escape like steam hissing from beneath a pot lid. The sudden flicker of madness dropped him to his knees. I will not fail you again, Princess Bryony, he declared. I will do what you have sent me to do, or I will die trying. Even with his head down, he could sense the stir of surprise going through the other guardsmen, could hear Avon Brone's sucked-in breath. Get up, Vanson. Her voice sounded strange. When he was on his feet again, he saw that the anger was back in her eyes, along with a glitter that might have been tears. I have had enough death, enough oaths, enough men's talk about honor and debts. I have swallowed them all until I am ready to scream. You may think I blame you for my brother's death. I do, in part, and not only you. But I am not so foolish as to think some other guard captain would have saved him. You may think I have given you this charge because I want to punish you. There may be a little truth to that, but I also know you for a man who has done other things well, and who has the trust of his soldiers. I'm told that you are level-headed, too. She took a step forward until only the broad sweep of her skirts separated them. Vanson couldn't help holding his breath. If you die without solving this mystery, you accomplish nothing. If you live, Even if you have failed your charge, you may still do some good for this land at another time." She paused, and for a teetering moment it seemed to Vanson that she might say absolutely anything at all. "But if the safety of any of my family is ever again on your shoulders," she finally suggested with a smile that would have been cruel were it not so weary, "then you do indeed have my permission to die trying, Captain Vanson." She turned to his men and called to them, "May all the gods protect you. May Perrin himself make your road smooth and straight." A moment later she was walking back across the courtyard with Brone and the two ladies in waiting hurrying to catch up. "Not quite a court favorite, Captain, are we?" asked Colin Dyer and laughed. "Mount up." Ferris Vanson did not understand what had just happened, but there were many miles ahead of them, days of riding, and he would have plenty of time to think about it. And we are going to stop there because the next section is fairly long. So there's no sense in starting it at 3:01. Sorry with the confusion. I assume we're all still on the line here. Yeah, because people are still commenting. So apparently, yeah, okay, good. Sorry that, who knows what that was. My son just appeared in the doorway with the chihuahua in his hands and stood there distracting me for several minutes, and then finally came in and stood even closer, still with the chihuahua squirming in his hands. And I thought, oh crap, I'd better see what that is. Maybe the chihuahua has broken his leg or something. I don't know. Because Walter has fallen off of our deck before, but he was fine. Apparently he weighs so little. It's like dropping a mouse, he just lands and trots away. Anyway, so but he was asking about the internet connection, which seems to have been fine for us. So yeah, and I didn't let him restart the router. Anyway, okay, so with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I will be back at 7 p.m. my time. Since it's now 3 o'clock in the morning my time, I'll be back at 7 in the evening my time to continue. I think we're going to get a little bit of Yasamez, who is always charming to read about because she's so effing mean. And it's always fun to read the mean characters. So with that, I just want to thank you all again for your extreme kindness in hanging out with me. And I'm very glad that we actually managed to get a whole session. I was going to be really irritated if we had lost the broadcast after losing the power last week, but apparently we didn't, so all good. Anyway, continue to take care of yourself and others, please. Very important stuff. Do kind stuff when you can, and when you can't, do no harm, as they say in the Hippocratic Oath. And meanwhile, I will return with at the next TAD time, which is 7 p.m. And until then, I want you all to be careful and take good care of yourselves, because you are important. And with that, I say good night and peace.